Hello, everyone. Hope you're having an amazing day. After the last incident, James doesn't overthink it. He looks at Diep, looks at Ly, and says, "We're going back to your mom's village for a few days. Just breathe." The timing happens to match the village festival. And it's also the anniversary of Diep's maternal grandfather's death, one of those days that pulls a family home whether they want it or not. They arrive late afternoon. The fields are wet, the air smells like soil and rain, and lanterns are already going up along the path. Ly is instantly excited, pointing at everything like she's seeing the countryside for the first time. James plays along, talking about festival snacks and how Grandma will spoil her. Diep smiles too, but it's guarded. This is her hometown. Home isn't only comfort. It's old rules, old judgments, old conversations that never really ended. Even the familiar sounds feel different now, like she's listening for something hiding underneath them. At the grandparents' house, relatives are already there. The greetings are loud. People pinch Ly's cheeks, hand her candy, tease James, call Diep by her childhood nickname. For a few minutes, it feels normal. Then, Diep notices the small shifts, the pause when she says they're only staying a few days, the side glances when she mentions work, the way certain voices turn careful around her. It's subtle, but familiar. Like the room already decided what kind of person she is, and she's just showing up to play her part. Dinner is crowded and warm. Rice, greens, fish, soup. Ly sits between Diep and James, proudly using chopsticks, showing the grandparents she can pick up even slippery pieces. The adults chat about weddings and babies and who moved to the city. Diep keeps her answers short, polite, careful. In a quiet moment, a distant relative smiles and says, "Land prices are crazy now. Ancestral property is sensitive. People forget where they came from." Diep's chopsticks pause. James catches it. Diep forces herself to keep eating, like she didn't hear. The relative adds, "Some people leave and don't come back until something happens." Then it gets complicated. The room tightens. Someone coughs. Someone pretends not to hear. The grandparents go quiet in that way older people do when they're hurt, but won't show it. Diep can feel heat rising in her face, not even from anger, more like humiliation with nowhere to go. Ly looks up, confused. "Mom?" Diep smiles fast. "Nothing, baby. Eat." She swallows the discomfort because Ly is right there, because she refuses to turn this into a fight, because she promised herself this trip would be peaceful. James watches her, jaw tight, like he wants to say something and is choosing not to for her sake. After dinner, they step outside. Festival sounds drift closer. The sky looks swollen, heavy with clouds. Ly asks to see the lanterns tomorrow. James says yes immediately. Diep stands near the edge of the yard, looking toward the banana grove behind the house. Wind moves the leaves in waves. The darkness beyond the yard feels heavier than it should. She can't explain it, but something in her chest stays tight, like old memories are shifting under the surface. Then the rain hits for real. It slams the roof hard enough to drown out the distant drums. Thunder rolls. The yard turns slick in minutes. And then, snap. The power cuts out. James turns on his phone flashlight. Diep checks her phone and realizes it's almost dead. Ly presses into Diep's side, suddenly scared. "It's okay," Diep murmurs, rubbing her back. "We're all here." For a moment, it's just a blackout. Then Diep hears a small voice outside. "Mom?" It sounds like Ly. Same tone, same little tremble. Diep's brain tries to explain it away. Echoes, another child, the wind playing tricks. But her body reacts first, heart hammering, like it already knows the answer. But Ly is right beside her. Diep's stomach drops. She looks down at her daughter. Ly shakes her head. "Not me," she whispers, eyes glossy with fear. And then the voice calls again, from behind the house. "Mom, Mom." Diep goes cold. James says, "Stay inside." But Diep is already moving. That word, "Mom," hits something primal. If there's even a chance a child is outside in this storm, she can't sit still. She grabs an old flashlight by the door. It sputters, then steadies into a weak circle. "I'll check the back," she says, quick and low. "Just a minute." James starts to follow, but relatives call to him. Candles, matches, checking on the grandparents. Small chaos that pulls him for a second. He hesitates, torn. Deep slips out into the rain. The backyard is mud and shadow. The flashlight beam catches wet ground, a barrel, the edge of the banana grove. Frogs croak loudly. Wind slaps the leaves, sharp and constant. "Hello?" Deep calls. "Who's there?" The flashlight flickers. Once, twice. Deep clicks it again and steps toward the drainage ditch behind the house. The shallow channel meant to carry rainwater away. Her foot slides. The mud gives way, the edge crumbles, and she drops sideways with a gasp. The flashlight swings, throwing light across wet banana trunks and rushing water. Diep scrambles for the edge, fingers slipping, nails digging into nothing. She tries to scream, but the storm swallows sound. The flashlight flickers again and dies. Darkness. Then, hands. Not imagined. Real. A grip on her arm. A hard pull. A drag through mud. Deep fights, kicking and twisting. But the ground gives her no traction. Her cries break apart in the rain, smothered before they reach the house. Inside, James realizes she's been gone too long. He calls her name. No answer. Cold dread hits, and he runs. "Deep!" he shouts, sprinting into the yard, phone flashlight sweeping the darkness. At the back of the house, his light lands on something pale in the mud. Diep's sandal, twisted, half buried. He swings the light wider and sees it. A drag mark. A rough line, cut through the wet ground, leading away toward the black fields beyond the banana grove. A few steps away, something else lies in the mud. Diep's flashlight, dead, its lens smeared with dirt. James's heart drops. He spins back, yelling for help, and the words come out broken under the storm. Behind him, Ly appears at the doorway, trembling, tears mixing with rain. She points into the darkness and sobs, "Dad, I saw someone carry Mom away." Adults rush out, shouting over the storm. But when they hear Ly, some hesitate, exchanging looks like, "She's scared. She's a child. She must have imagined it." James doesn't hesitate. His hands shake, but his eyes stay locked on the path those drag marks point to. He stands in the yard with rain lashing his face, staring out at the flooded fields, wide, dark, endless. And the truth lands, heavy and terrifying. Deep didn't just fall. She vanished, right here, in her own hometown. James doesn't wait for anyone to agree with him. He turns back to the doorway, drenched, chest heaving, and barks, "Call someone, now. Turn on every light you can. Candles, lanterns, anything." A couple relatives blink like they're still trying to process what's happening. One of them, older, tries to sound reasonable. "James, it's pouring. Maybe she slipped." James cuts him off. "Then why is her sandal out here? Why is there a drag mark?" The word drag hangs in the air, ugly and undeniable. Ly clutches the doorframe with both hands, sobbing so hard her shoulders shake. "I saw it," she cries again. "I saw someone carry Mom. They went that way, behind the bananas." Another adult rushes to pull Ly inside. "Stop saying that. You're scaring everyone," they whisper. Like fear is something you can control by shushing a child. James whips around. "Don't tell her to stop. She's telling the truth." A thunderclap rattles the roof. Rain comes down in sheets. The yard is basically a shallow lake now, mud swallowing every step. James angles his phone flashlight low and follows the drag mark until it breaks apart in pooled water. His mind runs fast, connecting dots he never wanted to connect. Diep was uneasy all evening. That sarcastic comment at dinner, the way Deep went quiet, the power going out at the worst moment possible. That voice calling Mom from outside, using Nye's exact tone. Someone didn't just take advantage of the storm. Someone planned this. He forces himself to breathe. "Where's my wife?" he shouts to the people gathering behind him. "Who was outside? Who left the house?" Nobody answers. They're all staring at the mud, the sandal, the dead flashlight like it's a bad dream. The grandparents stand in the doorway, faces pale. Grandmother's hands shake as she holds a candle, flame trembling in the wind. Grandfather's eyes look fixed, distant, like old grief is coming back to claim something new. "James," grandmother whispers, voice thin, "in this weather, maybe she..." James shakes his head hard. "No, I was right there. I heard her. I saw the mark." He looks at Nye. "Sweetheart, listen to me. You're safe. Stay inside with Grandma. Do not go outside, okay?" Nye's eyes are huge. She nods, but she's still shaking. "Dad, please bring Mom back." His throat tightens so hard it hurts. He crouches and cups her face with muddy hands. "I will. I promise." He stands up fast because standing still feels like dying. "Who has a motorbike?" he demands. "Or a boat? Anything that can move in this rain. We need to check the road to the canal and the path to the old fields." A cousin points. "The small road floods. The bridge is slippery." James glares at him. "Then we walk." Someone else says, "We should wait for daylight." James almost laughs, sharp and bitter. If she's hurt out there, she doesn't have daylight. Finally, a few men grab raincoats, flashlights, and a thick wooden stick like that will protect them from whatever this is. They follow James into the backyard. The banana grove is a wall of wet leaves. Every sound is amplified. Frogs, wind, water rushing through ditches. James calls her name over and over. "Diep! Diep!" No answer. He sweeps his phone light across the mud. The drag mark becomes faint, then disappears underwater. Beyond the grove, the field stretches open and black, dotted with small puddles reflecting lightning. One man mutters, "It's impossible to see. If she fell in the ditch..." James snaps, "Stop saying fell." They spread out anyway, calling, scanning the ground, shining flashlights into ditches and under bushes. James can barely feel his feet. The mud steals his shoes with every step, but he keeps moving. In his head, he sees Diep's face at dinner, how she stared at her bowl while people talked about land like it was a weapon. He remembers her quiet smile for Nye, the way she swallowed her own discomfort. Diep always absorbs the hits quietly until she can't. Lightning flashes, and for a split second the field is bright enough to see the shapes. The narrow path leading toward the back road, the line of trees near the canal. James runs. The men shout after him, but he doesn't care. At the edge of the field, near the canal path, he sees something that makes his blood go cold. A fresh footprint, deep, heel pressed hard like someone was carrying weight. Then another, and then tire marks. Not from a tractor. Too narrow. Motorbike. James drops to one knee and traces it with his fingers. The rain tries to erase it, but the mud holds a memory for a few minutes longer. "They used a bike," he says, voice low, dangerous. "They didn't drag her the whole way. They moved her to the road." One of the men swears under his breath. Another looks back toward the house like he wants to run inside and lock the door. James stands, shaking with rage now, not just fear. Who knows these paths better than anyone, he asks. Who would know the power would go out? Who would know where the bananas hide the back ditch? No one answers, but their silence is loud. Back at the house, the women are crying softly. Someone is praying. Someone is trying to calm Nye, who keeps repeating the same sentence like it's the only thing she has left. "I saw someone carry Mom away." An uncle kneels in front of her. "Sweetheart, maybe you saw a shadow." Nye jerks away. "No, it was a person. They had a raincoat. They covered Mom's mouth." Grandmother's face crumples. She looks like she wants to deny it, but she can't. Not when the child's terror is that specific. James returns to the yard, soaked and furious. He points at the men. You, go to the front road and look for fresh tracks. You, check the canal bridge. If anyone saw a motorbike pass, wake them up. Someone hesitates. It's late. People will be angry. James's eyes flash. Let them be angry. My wife is missing. He pulls out his phone and realizes he has barely any signal. Of course. Countryside, storm, blackout. Every single thing stacked against them. He tries anyway. One bar appears, then disappears. He dials. It fails. He slams the screen with his thumb, forcing calm into his voice. Does anyone have signal? Anyone? A younger cousin holds up a phone. Sometimes near the shrine, on the higher ground. James is already moving. He runs through the rain, past festival decorations flapping like torn flags, toward the small ancestral shrine area near the edge of the village. The ground rises slightly. The wind is brutal up there, but his phone finally flickers with 2 bars. He calls the local authority number someone once gave him for emergencies. It rings. Rings again. Then a voice answers, sleepy and irritated. James speaks fast, clear. My wife is missing. Possible abduction? Power outage. Storm. We found drag marks and motorbike tracks near the canal path. We need help now. There's a pause. Then the voice changes. Name? Address? James gives it. Hands shaking, he forces himself not to scream. He hears movement on the other end. Someone waking. Someone else. Stay there. We'll send people. But in this weather, James cuts in. She could be hurt. She could be taken. Please. The line crackles. We're coming. James ends the call and stands there in the rain, staring out across the village. The festival lanterns glow faintly through the storm, like the village is trying to pretend life is normal. But nothing is normal. He runs back to the house. Nye sees him and launches herself forward, tiny fists pounding his soaked shirt. Did you find her? Did you find Mom? James drops to his knees, pulling her into his arms so tight she squeaks. Not yet, he whispers, voice breaking. But we're looking. Nye sobs harder. It's my fault. I heard the voice and No, James says immediately, firm. No, none of this is your fault. You did the right thing. You told us. He looks up at the adults. His gaze goes from face to face, searching for cracks, searching for guilt, searching for anything. Because here's what his gut is screaming now. This isn't random. This is personal. And the scariest part isn't the darkness outside. It's that the person who took Diep might be close enough to be standing in the same yard, pretending to pray. The local men finally arrive. Raincoats, flashlights, stern faces. They ask questions. They examine the sandal, the mud, the back ditch. One of them crouches by the drag mark and nods slowly. This is not a slip, he says. James's chest tightens with both relief and terror. Relief that someone finally believes him. Terror, because believing it makes it real. They split into groups. One goes to the canal road. Another goes toward the small bridge. A third checks the village entrance where motorbikes usually pass. Grandmother clutches her candle and whispers, "Why here? Why now?" James answers without looking away from the field. Because she came home. The words sound awful, like a curse. Thunder rumbles again, but the rain begins to soften. Just a little. The storm is moving on, leaving behind a village drenched and shaken. James stands at the edge of the yard, water dripping from his hair, and stares into the darkness where the fields begin. He realizes something else too, something that makes his skin crawl. If someone was bold enough to take Diep from her own hometown during a family gathering, during a blackout, then they weren't afraid of being seen. They were counting on everyone doubting the child. They were counting on the adults saying, "It must have been an accident." James wipes rain from his face and takes one step forward, then another, like he's stepping into a nightmare on purpose. Because somewhere out there, Diep is alive. Or he has to believe she is. And tonight, he's not just searching for his wife, he's hunting the truth that this village has been hiding for years. James brings Diep and their daughter Ly to Diep's maternal grandparents' village for a short break, arriving during a festival and the anniversary of her grandfather's death. The countryside seems peaceful, but Diep feels uneasy, especially after a relative makes sharp comments about land and ancestral property at dinner. That night, heavy rain knocks out the power. Diep hears a child's voice calling Mom from behind the house, yet Ly is inside with her. Diep rushes out with a weak flashlight and disappears near the banana grove. James finds only her sandal, drag marks in the mud, and the dead flashlight. Ly sobs that she saw someone carrying her mother away, but adults dismiss her fear. James follows the trail, finds motorbike tracks, and realizes this wasn't an accident. It was planned.